And we end night 3 of Romford Film Festival on In the Grip of Terror. And let me start with Lawrie, and if I can just get you to go down the line and introduce yourself and your involvement in this project, that would be great for the audience. Thank you.
Hi there, folks. I'm Lawrie Brewster, and I'm a director of the film and a producer.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Sergei Subotsky. I am executive producer for this movie.
Hello, everybody. I'm Megan Tremethick, and I play Nurse Charlotte Gibbon.
Hi, everyone. I'm Dorian, and I play Mancher. And Jarrett, I guess.
Good evening. I'm Peter Mahoney, and I play the Mortician.
Hi, everyone. I'm Novarro Ramon, also known as Shadi, and I play one of the patients.
So, first of all, thank you very much for bringing the film to Romford. My first question would really need to be with you, Sergei. Can you talk to us a little bit about the timing, the return of Amicus, and how this relationship all came to be?
Yes, happily. So, I'm trying to think of the timeline. 4 or 5 years ago, I think Lawrie approached my mother, Fiona Subotsky, who at that time, and for some time, had been point of contact for Amicus and inquiries about my father's films and his archives. But by that stage, I mean, my mother is now 82. By that stage, the archives had come to me, and also the name, the company, was with myself and my brother Dimitri, who's here this evening. And so the inquiry came through to me. And so Lawrie and I started talking, and I had seen a couple of his movies. I was particularly impressed with The Devil's Machine, and I thought we could strike up a relationship and discuss how to revive the Amicus brand. And after some time of us getting to know each other and some discussion, a lot of discussion over Zoom, because I'm mainly based in London and Laurie's up in Scotland, so we took it from there, step by step.
Really good. So I guess my next question would be how the development of the film itself and the subject matter, and how you made the decision about what to create, and that whole process of the unravelling of that, if you wouldn't mind. Probably for you, Lawrie.
And again, I just want to express my thanks as well to the Lumiere, the Romford Film Festival, and everyone for giving us the honour and the privilege of sharing our film with this fantastic audience of horror fans. Yes. And I am even more nerdy as a horror fan than any of you, by the way, so rest assured. It was also an enormous privilege and honour to develop a wonderful friendship with Sergei as we came to collaborate on the nature of what the first film would be, and not just Sergei, but Dimitri at times was keeping a careful eye on the proceedings as well, and that care and caution was as important as the love and enthusiasm we had for Amicus Productions, because we wanted to do it right in a way that felt authentic and relevant. I think one of the most fantastic things was your mother, Fiona, actually getting involved with the suggestion of stories. And 2 of the 3 stories are inspired adaptations of works she suggested, which I think is fantastic, because she was so heavily involved with Sergei's wonderful father, Milton Subotsky, who is a hero of mine, as well as Roger Corman, as a fantastic creative innovator, I think, in horror. And it felt like doing something that might please him as much as we could, was also something. So I guess you could say there was a sentimental core to it.
I'm taking it, Lawrie, that you think he's keeping an eye on you from beyond the grave.
And that said, I think he probably is.
I think you're probably going to make him quite happy if he was watching you from beyond the grave, because I think, I might be wrong, audience, let us know. I think you've paid a remarkable homage. It looks very much like an Amicus film. How difficult is that to achieve some 48 years later from the last Amicus film? In order to make something look legitimately Amicus.
Well, funny enough, and the one thing we wanted to avoid at all costs was something that felt like too meta-referential or pastiche. The truth is, and you'll know this anyway, Spencer, is that I am somewhat of an eccentric filmmaker who lives rather in the past anyway. And
you hide it well.
and the artists that work with us, like Megan and Dorian and Shadi, they're all old souls. Their heroes are from the decades of cinema that well precede the current. And if anything, our artists that work with us feel a sense of cultural alienation from the more modern eras of horror. Not that we don't enjoy many modern horror films, but it just didn't feel like us. So in other words, we never felt like we were pretending. We were just expressing ourselves with a very earnest and sincere way, and it just so happened to express itself like that. As mad as that sounds. But we have a project called the British Horror Studio that if folks check out, you'll see we're always talking about antiques, making strange old props, and celebrating earlier forms of horror artistry that inspire our works now.
Megan, quite a lot of attention there on yourself, and I think you've managed to spin off of everything throughout that film. And I mean, one of the last things I expected to find, most of you involved in, is a dance routine sort of towards the end of the film. What was the favourite part of the shoot for you?
So much, to be honest. I don't know if I could just pick one. Being in the wraparound felt like an incredible experience, just because I grew up as a huge Amicus fan. Actually, my dad told me all about Amicus when I was very young, and one of the first films, the horror films we watched together, was Vault of Horror, and I just loved it. So I think it would have to be the wraparound, just because it felt really magical to get to be a part of that.
And a quick one for you, Peter. Sorry. So, can you explain to us a little bit about your involvement in the project? I mean, I appreciate you introduce yourself, but can you sort of explain how you fit in to this whole machine?
To the whole hex machine?
Yes.
I also really liked the Devil's Machine or Automata, and saw it on a little clip on a DVD, then couldn't find it anywhere. And the only way I could get hold of it was through a crowdfunder. So I got involved with the crowdfunder, which in turn led to deeper involvement with Hex and becoming one of the strategic partners. And I had always, since the age of 10, been interested in Amicus. I do remember Tales from the Crypt, the iconic picture of Grimsdyke, Peter Cushing, leering out of the poster at the cinema. I remember seeing this terrifying me in Unit 4 cinema and thinking, wow, I'd love to be able to see that, but I can't do it yet. So I've had to wait a little while to actually, I have seen it since, but I've had to wait a little while now to actually become part of that.
Fantastic. We've got quite an audience, so rather than me waffling on, let's get some questions from them, and we've got one right at the front here to kick us off.
Thank you very much for that film. I think it can stand proudly with the Amicus films of the past. I'm wondering, when you're choosing the stories, by choosing one story, did that lead on to another you were choosing, and how easy was it to fit the order that they went into the film in?
I'm going to pass this one to Sergei, but I will add this because I can never pass up the opportunity to do a brief Sergei impression. He said something like, it began like, Lawrie, my mother has some wonderful suggestions for stories. I think we should rather look at it. And Fiona is a very determined woman, and I wasn't going to stand in her way because she knows more about horror than even me, and is a wonderful published author in her own right that talks about horror. The only one we did tweak out of the three ourselves was a Lovecraft inspired by. I love all the Gothic horror authors, and of course that it does include H.P. Lovecraft, and I felt that would be a nice addition because we hadn't seen Lovecraft within the Amicus universe. But Sergei's mother had wonderful suggestions.
Well, that is actually true. She, in her retirement, she has taken up horror as an interest, and in particular Dracula. So she published a book called Dracula for Doctors. And so she, as a retired doctor, retired psychiatrist herself, had a lot of familiarity with the medical macabre. And so that really was the inspiration for the choice of stories, as well as them being out of copyright. But in a way, looking back to those older stories, which are still remade. I mean, if you look at the sort of short horror stories that are still sometimes made for television, they're going back to these fantastic old stories. So I don't think there's anything wrong with that, and I'm pleased it was taken up.
Excellent. We've got another question at the front, Jeff.
I did actually like the song and dance routine at the end. I don't know where that comes from and relevance to the story, but I really did like it. What were the influences for that scene? There was quite a bit of Robert Palmer, Addicted to Love, I think, thrown in there. What were the influences for that?
Yeah. So when we were looking at the story with the idea of this music therapy kind of experiment, it felt like an opportunity to present a song that paid homage to a lesser known aspect of Amicus, which was their earlier life as a distributor of rockabilly music films. So with stories interspersed with rockabilly bands, and you'd probably be familiar with that, and here's the blah blah blahs, just have to be playing in the bar, and you have to go through the whole song. And so, we just thought that would be a wonderful chance to add a little bit of colour and fun to that segment, which is quite an outrageous segment, and with that rockabilly wink, it was a great way to, as I say, bring something in of Amicus's past before it went into horror.
It's quite a moment, and like you said, completely threw me off. Although it wasn't out of character, it was just a surprise where it hit. Yeah. Have we got any other questions? Right at the front, Chris.
And this is for everyone. Which Amicus star of old would you most like to have worked with?
Well, I've always loved the obvious wonderful talents of Christopher Lee and Peter Cushing, geniuses, masterpiece of artistry. But actually, for me, it would have been Patrick Magee. I've always loved Patrick Magee. When I first saw him in Mask of the Red Death, playing opposite Vincent Price, I just fell in love with this actor. And of course, you see him in Barry Lyndon and everything. One of the finest actors of his generation.
Well, I am not a filmmaker myself directly, but what I can say is that what I've learned from actors who worked with Peter Cushing is how much they respected him and how much he cared for other actors, and was clearly an extremely decent man to work with. So I think I'm going to name him.
Well, you've stolen my one, so But I am also going to say Peter Cushing. I deeply admire his performance style. I think I particularly love Peter Cushing because I've always found him a very transformative actor. He seems to just morph into every character he plays. Dialect, mannerisms, the way he looks. I deeply admire him.
Well, I feel like naming Peter Cushing 3 times would be a bit brutal, but I mean, yeah, the more I hear about him, it would be absolutely fantastic. But also, go back to Vault of Horror and Whovian in Me, Tom Baker, the man. I mean, to be honest, my final look is Mansure with the big hair and the goatee or the big beard. It was very reminiscent, and I really enjoyed that. It's kind of only in hindsight I look back, I was like, hang on a minute, the Vault of Horror look. But yeah, I think it was so. His role in Vault of Horror, his eyes especially, when I was watching all the Amicus films in preparation, it was the intensity of the eyes, and I was like, oh, we have to make sure this is in. So that's why when I'm freaking out, every shot it's like, so I really tried. I was like, we have to make sure it's in there somewhere. So you have to cut every scene to remove them. So I made sure there's plenty of opportunities. Oh,
Donald Pleasance. I think as an individual, he had with his war record, a very modest man with a very significant war record and experience. He brings menace, gravitas, and humanity to his parts. And I just think it would have been a fascinating individual to sit down with a cup of tea and talk to.
I'm going to go for the obvious one, Peter Cushing as well. Sorry, guys.
You should be.
Dan.
The film looks fantastic. I love the production value in the locations and the set, etc. Can you tell me how long it took to shoot and were there any major challenges on production?
Yeah, thank you for the compliment regarding the production value. I will never present any sort of illusion that we were working with enormous riches of resources. We are a boutique production company and distributor. We try our best to do with as much as we can, with often very little. That said, we had the fortune of accessing an environment where we could create sets. So if you recall the Cool Air ward, that was the same set as the kind of Victorian bedroom that was used in the third segment, with folks repainting that environment and then so forth. And the round room that was a hospital ward, that was a lot of work. That was actually a derelict space within a building that we replastered, tiled the floor, and did all the joinery and work, which now actually is a permanent feature of that building, which is a beautiful thing that the Amicus film resulted in. I'm helping to go towards saving a building. And in terms of things like the retro aesthetic, as it were, post-production tools help with the colour and the grading, but in terms of the cinematography, it was trying to embrace a style of I don't think you could refer to it as a school. It was more like an aesthetic that was just common to British film and television in the early 70s. But again, that comes quite naturally to us. We would have struggled with a contemporary ordinary film, probably.
I noticed there was a hand a few rows up near the back. Yep.
Yeah, it's a similar kind of question. I was going over the cinematography and also the scoring. I guess that was a bit of a boring technical question. Like, what did you shoot on? And also, what was your approach to the music and the scoring?
Yeah, well, the music is an interesting one because it comprised of a lot of, it's not very romantic, so the answer is fairly technical, a legion of Fiverr artists and sound design guys, and in combination with a bank of original compositions that oftentimes were used to bridge sections of public domain music that they were able to extend. So for example, a 30-second advert, we would compose more. It would take quite an amount of time to EQ mix and get everything together. But once we got a formula going with the guys we were working with, it actually became surprisingly easy, and perhaps because it was always this kind of scratchier mono audio, we had access to a lot more material we could utilize. And as regards to the camera that we shot on, you may be surprised because it is with our films we shoot on a C300. This is really exciting for you. C300 Mark III with Cine primes, but on this film we put that aside because our poor camera chap had a very bad back and wanted to use a brace system and everything with Fuji HS. Yeah, you guys can finish that. Fascinating aim.
It's an interesting topic that I was going to come back to. The film is almost entirely scored. Where did that decision come from? And obviously, if you're bringing in a lot of fiver musicians, for want of a better term, how much effort did that take to almost cover the entire film?
In some ways it was excruciating, but once the process started it became easier. I don't know if anyone here attended the screening of The Slave and the Sorcerer, our 80s. Well, with that film's score, which was also almost from start to finish, I literally sang that on recorded tracks, and then composers working with me created arrangements from that. So it was a bit like that, but using all these sections. Some of it was classical music that I wanted variations made from, and others were like, I'll give you an example. Like Canada has a whole section of public domain music that was used in its television from the 50s earlier. Some of that was useful to use as inspiration cues and bridges, and it was a very patchwork approach. Incidentally, if any of you are fans of the TV show Ren and Stimpy, it too accessed all of its episodes used public domain music from Canadian broadcasting, so some of that worked its way in as well.
That's really cool. Did we have any other questions out there? So, no pressure, anybody. So, I mean, I appreciate your just having your first screening of this film. What do you think the future for Amicus looks like? What have you had any discussions about what comes next? And can you give us any meat on the bone over what potentially could follow?
I'll certainly pass this as well to Sergei, but I'll add Amicus Productions, along with our own horror company Hex Studios, are part of a project called the British Horror Studio, which broadly speaking is a horror online community we've created that talks about and is exposed to our stories about the making of our films, that shares a certain retro characteristic. And in terms of future Amicus films, me and Sergei take and Dimitri as well, we'll take a relaxed, honest, and spiritually and emotionally authentic approach to finding the next project that just feels right. But it's also pragmatic for the resources, the locations we have access to, and all that. For me personally, I always enjoyed Now the Screaming Stars, and I feel that while I'm excited to move on to another portmanteau, it might be an interesting opportunity to move into a cultural space that I feel maybe Hammer isn't going to be entering now, that Amicus dipped its toes into with Now the Screaming Stars. And that might be an interesting idea to look at, an adaptation of a novel, which we can add some special Amicus flair to.
Thank you, Lawrie. Yes, I mean, that really is the essence of what we're looking at for the future, is not necessarily just portmanteau films, although of course we know people enjoy them, but that you're right, Lawrie, there were other films. The Skull was another one, which had quite a surreal section to it. If you remember the courtroom
Amazing.
scene in that, as well as innovative filming with the movement of the skull at the end. But there may be references you'll want to make in future Amicus films that you're right that we're not trying to make a pastiche, but to be inspired by the original films and to create a certain style, a certain atmosphere. So I'm certainly willing to look at full-length films with a single narrative, and we're going to take it forwards.
I think that sounds good, guys.
And it might seem like a bit of a silly question, but even to yourself, Sergei, what was the weight? How did you deal with the weight of responsibility over bringing something new to Amicus? Because, you know, at the end of the day, there's going to be a lot of public pressure on a project that is so steeped in history, film history, and even down to, you know, a parental responsibility, if you like. How, you know, what sort of level of nerves did that bring in you?
Well, I think I've always enjoyed and admired my father's work, so I'm a fan just like anybody else in that sense, with some insider knowledge. And in terms of shouldering the burden, well, look at the broad shoulders of Lawrie and
the broad waist as well, unfortunately. But we're trying to work on the bottom half.
No, you're asking me a serious question, and I understand what you're saying, which is to say we're trying to do this with some respect and care, and with reference to a lot of the things that my father himself said. I'm sure Lawrie will confirm that many times I've referred to things about my father's filmmaking approach that he himself said, and I think by going back to that, that's how to respect his legacy.
And how about you, Lawrie?
Well, I'll add to Sergei that respecting the legacy of the enormous contributions Milton Subotsky made to independent horror and just horror in Britain was one of the reasons we wanted to work so hard to create a film, because it set an interesting and a wonderfully entertaining precedent that we felt wasn't being covered, really. And
make just one little comment though. I have to say that I too really enjoyed the kind of the musical, you know, the rather unexpected and slightly bizarre musical section, and I think my dad actually would have enjoyed that too. I mean, he did manage to get some music into Amicus films. You might remember the Roy Castle section, and yes, a reference back. So I found that very enjoyable.
You know, in a broader sense, at least for my part in Amicus, we have the opportunity as we bring back Amicus to act as responsible custodians of something that has a remarkable and special place in all our hearts. It's one of the reasons I said at the beginning that we would never and could never produce a better film than the ones you will remember from Amicus. But that it could serve as a wonderful inspiration for producing more and continuing a type of storytelling that wasn't occurring. And it never entertained our ideas for a second to misuse the idea of Amicus to produce things that were inauthentic and not representative of the things folks cherish. So in other words, it is with great humility, care and love of the original films that we look to, proceed with our new productions. We would never want to denigrate that which has inspired us from the first place and that which you guys and us as Amicus fans care about so much.
I'm going to just ask a question. Now, let's go from this side, moving forward. I know that everyone that's involved wears multiple hats. When you're, because you watch some of your stuff online and you're involved in all kinds of everything, when you're not acting and you're involved in other aspects of the production, what is your favourite part?
I would say I would like to, well, at the moment my favorite part is probably just acting, but if I get more chance to write, I would probably like to do that more. So I know that doesn't quite answer, but in the future, I think that would be something I would enjoy outside of acting.
In real life, I'm actually a doctor. Might not be obvious, but I am. And I've really liked bringing the authentic, or fairly authentic, medical type props, some of the bodies which have been built by Nottingham Trent University's Experimental Materials Group, who've done research for me in the past on synthetic skins and other materials. So it's been lovely to bridge that academic area and bring their skill sets into the film arena. So I've really enjoyed bridging that.
I think for me, probably be after acting, of course, which is truly like the number one passion, is always the same as you. It would be directing, which is something that's been climbing very close to acting now on just enjoyment levels. And most recently, just in February, for another little, production team under the British Horror Studio called the B Team, we did our first film under that unit, which it's basically giving everyone like myself who have aspirations in other areas the opportunity to explore those areas, whereas we might not often get that chance. So that was a film where it was kind of just a small cast. It was like yourself, me, Shadi, our other really good friend Sam, who was my co-star with the glasses and was whimpering a lot, and you will know. But that was really a fun opportunity because we actually got to do, I got to do some writing with another great friend, Seamus, and even some directing as well as everything else. And it's really nice that we're getting to do all that, and the B Team is such a fantastic unit to exist, to present all those opportunities. So that's something I'm really excited to explore with whatever the future presents. Hopefully it just keeps on getting better. No, that's the second time.
It's okay.
I just want this.
Well, for the things I did on this film that was my favourite, since some of you said you liked it, I did the dance choreography for the crazy dance scene, and that was fun. Got to kind of look at some 1960s dancing for inspiration. That was a real blast. Other than that, probably I did a bit of help with sewing the nurses' costumes for the film. I made them, so that was a fun challenge as well, kind of getting to research and try to make them as accurate as possible, other than the length of the skirts. Yeah. And
so I just want to again thank you very much for bringing the film to us. We really appreciate it. It's been a great honour. It's been fantastic to see it here on a big screen. I know you sent us a link to look at, but it looked and sounded amazing. Really good visuals, really good thoughts that are probably ingrained on several people's minds, whether it's the dance routine or scary pointing characters in the darkness. Thank you ever so much. Let's give these guys a fantastic round of applause. Thank you.